Today on the Ever Onward podcast, we have Scott Curtis. Scott is a longtime friend. Everyone knows Scott in the entire valley. He's the CEO of the Idaho Youth Ranch. He has just done tremendous things his whole career at multiple nonprofits. Was at the YMCA for a long time and did wonderful, legendary things there. Now has been with the Idaho Youth Ranch as their CEO for several years. It will be very fun to have Scott on today and to get the updates at the Idaho Youth Ranch and all things in the community because he is so connected. So today on Ever Onward, Scott Curtis. Scott, thanks for coming on.
My pleasure. It's great to be here.
How you been? It's been
I've been good.
Usually we
really
catch
good.
up a little more than we have.
Yeah, I've been really good. We're really now lifting our heads up completely above the fire from 2.5 years ago. And that took a lot longer than I think any of us expected. But some great learnings and some great improvements, honestly, from it. So really excited about focusing on the
Why don't
mission.
you tell us a little bit about that? Because it's not like you didn't have a little going on. It was right when you were opening the ranch.
Yeah, it was right before we were in the final construction stages of the ranch, trying to open our residential facility, and we have a pretty significant distribution center and trucking center that supports our 24 thrift stores around the state. That's where the fire happened, and that's what becomes pretty critical here is that it actually wiped out the efficiencies that have been built into our thrift operations. So it just took a long time. Took a long time to rebuild. Took a long time negotiating insurance and things like that. And we're in a great place now. Mission's fully supported, and we're just running. And you try and make lemonade out of lemons with these things. So there's some things about that campus that are so different now post-fire in terms of, one, safety. And I'm not just talking about fire safety. That was important.
Yeah.
Because this was a pretty catastrophic event, and fortunately no one was hurt. But other safety issues, just in terms of about how a trucking fleet operates on the same campus where there's a lot of staff and forklifts. And we also have a store there. We have an outlet store there, so we have the public coming in and donating. And those things used to intersect a lot more. There was a lot of overlap, and now we've got the efficiency of the campus built in. So that's an exciting piece. But it's mostly exciting because those things take energy and focus from senior leaders to get through, and really we want our focus on
your
the
mission.
youth and families of Idaho and what they're needing. So we're now fully back.
So I've known you a long time.
Yeah.
I want to get a little bit back. I want to talk a little bit about you and know your dad and just your upbringing and being here. And let's just go back a little bit.
I'm not sure if I'm ready.
But I want to start. I want to start by talking about when I first met you. I remember I'd met you before, but I heard you speak at Caldwell at the YMCA. You won't remember this, but I was invited out, and you
came on a tour with us.
But you had an event out there, and you got up.
Yep.
At the event.
It was our annual campaign celebration. Yep.
Anyway, I remember walking out going, "Oh my gosh, that guy is legit." And seriously, it was so impactful on me because what you did is you got up and you just talked about the leadership to get there and what you've been doing and everything else, and you had all the stats of what that place meant to Caldwell, and it was really impactful, Scott. And I remember going, "Oh wow, this guy's really the guy." And then I watched what you did with Jim, and then you went to the ranch. But before we get there, because it was so impactful hearing you that day, tell us about you and tell us what the DNA where it's from.
Wow.
Thanks
for that opportunity. That's a privilege to be able to talk about that. One thing I'd say that's an overarching thing that have come to appreciate more and more, and the older I get, is really how blessed I've been in terms of the work I've been able to do. The reason I'm able to speak passionately about the things I've done is because they're so great and because I've been fortunate to be involved with them. So my background originally was as a math teacher. So I was a high school math teacher. I've loved youth my whole life, loved working with youth, but I've been more drawn to those that were on the margins, struggling.
But you grew up here.
You want me to go way back?
I want you to go way back.
Oh boy. Okay,
because listen, I think like So let me just tell you, like, we've had this, like, a little bit of we always are saying, hey, are what we doing with our time the most beneficial, right?
Yeah.
And I had that moment a couple weeks ago where, like, I do this podcast, been doing it for a long time now, 5 years. And it's had a couple different things. And then its new thing is Ever Onward, is our new branding with our rebranding of our company. And I like the name. I like what I do. And then I had this reset because we're, like, looking at the next year's podcast. I'm like, am I doing the right thing? I'm telling you a little thing. I'm like,
Great question.
So I sat down and I went through what could it be? What has it been? Is there a way to make it more real estate focused? Is there a way to make it more interesting for listeners? Because we have a lot of listeners now. And then I thought, I scrapped the whole thing. I had a whole outline. Of the new way I wanted to do it. And then I thought, screw this.
It sounds like you.
I just want to talk to people that I want to talk to.
That's awesome.
And I want to, and I think one of the things so if I think why I do this, what the best thing for me is I get to talk to people like you. Okay. And otherwise we wouldn't spend an hour because we're so busy to sit back. But I want to hear, because the people that I admire, and Scott, you're at the top of the list, I want to hear your story. And I think people want to hear why, like, it inspires people. So I do want you to start from the beginning.
Great. I was born on third base. That's what I'm going to say. And I really recognize that. I've been blessed my whole life. So let's see, I grew up Meridian, and Meridian had about 7,000 people in it in my early childhood, and obviously changed a lot. Ours was the only residential street right off of Eagle Road, surrounded by farmland. You all will recognize that now as the place where the village has been built, and Kleiner Park. I could smell Kleiner feedlot from my bedroom window. So grew up in rural Meridian. Had a really wonderful parents, and a real stable home, and I appreciate these things more now because of the youth I get to work with. And I recognize that when we talk about adverse childhood experiences, the gift I bring is how I was developed through my life. And probably the gap is there's some of those things I cannot fully relate to, right? Because I had so many, and my house wasn't perfect, but it was good.
But empathy is a weird thing. Because I've thought this 100 times, 1,000,000 times in the ER, where you want to be empathetic to someone's situation that comes in and you're caring for them, but there's times you just can't, because you know what I mean? As much as you want to listen to them and understand what they're going through, you can't imagine unless you've been through it. And I think that's one of the great mysteries of life is how do we listen to someone, connect with them, try to understand them, but know that we really never can understand what it's like to be in that position.
And I think that's a lot of the definition of compassion. Like, without being able to truly empathize because you can't feel it, at some level you can say, I'm compassionate about this person having a very different experience and experiencing
I love
it
that.
differently. So I was the third of 4 kids growing up in Meridian. My dad was a longtime Hewlett-Packard employee. He had been in the Navy, though, so that's pretty formative in my life. Is that I really did come from a military family and extended family involved in the military. So grew up with a lot of appreciation for service to the country and things like that. My mom and dad met in the Navy. He was a submariner and she was a Navy nurse. And so that impacted them a lot. When Dad left the Navy, he got hired by Hewlett-Packard, and then he was part of the large Hewlett-Packard development and relocation to Idaho. I don't remember any of this because I really was raised here. I don't remember any of this time of my family, but he was brought to Idaho as part of what was back then the disk memory division that was getting developed, which became the largest Hewlett-Packard division at that time in the world. So it was all a part of when Hewlett-Packard became really involved in this community, and I got to see that. And then my mom, as I mentioned, she was a Navy nurse, and she really got into the birth support movement. So she became a birth and parenting nurse, and eventually ended up working long-term for St. Luke's and being the head of birth and parenting development there. So what that meant is that in my early childhood, we had a lot of women sitting around our house in the family room breathing in very funny ways. So I learned about Lamaze really early on in the 70s. And so that was great too. And I think just like the things that have shaped us. I say I was born on third base. Part of being born on third base was having stability in my family, right? Yeah. And we didn't have a perfect family, and we didn't have everything and stuff like that. But, you know, I don't remember ever wondering if we were going to have another meal or next, like, where's that going to come from, or shelter or things like that. And I just was surrounded by so many caring adults and really representatives of caring for others, right? Yeah. My parents were great. So when we were young, they did exchange students, right? So we had 3 or 4 different exchange students live with us, one of whom I consider my brother now. He lives in the States. He's Enrique's Costa Rican. So he's my Tico brother. And so we had great relational stuff happen in our house. But then we also had a couple things that were really formative for me as a kid. My parents called these, it's Good Friday, so we could talk about this, getting a collect call from God. Because they got reached out to, this was now the 80s, the early 80s. And, you know, the unwed mothers thing was big back then. And that was still when the culture was, you know, send the girls away if they're going to have a baby and they're underage. And so over the course of probably about, 6 or 7 years in my childhood, I first start remembering this about 3rd grade, but probably through 8th grade or so, my parents took in unwed mothers into our house. Wow. And that happened about 4 or 5 times. It was just so fascinating to be a young person and see that. And so they would live with us until they had the baby, and then most of them actually.
Hey, by the way, this is why we go back.
Yeah, that's
like,
cool
this
stuff.
is like,
and honestly, it's homage to my parents and honor to them. So, boy, I don't know how much you might want me winging off into stories.
Winging off into stories. We got an hour, man.
Well, let me come back to that, because I will wing off in a story, because this is quite a story that still I just love it, about Idaho and grace and goodness. But I remember being a child, and I think it was around 5th or 6th grade, and one of these young women that came to live with us, and she, I don't know how to explain it other than to say, as a 5th or 6th grader, I recognized my maturity was just greater than hers, right? I mean, and I started to realize then, wow, I have had a different life than some people. And I think that kind of exposure was really healthy for me, because growing up in Meridian, Idaho, it was easy to believe that the whole world has this middle class, somewhat rural, play youth sports, go to church, have lots of caring adults in your life. And it was good for me to learn that that's not everyone's experience, right? And that shapes people, and also there's decisions you make in life that can impact for a long time. So, so I told you I'd tell you a story about this, because it came back when I was in Caldwell. And I'm not gonna use any names here, but when I was living in Caldwell, there were these wonderful folks across the street, and they had two girls that were sort of a 5 years older than my young children. So just old enough to kind of be like mentors, or they were the older, cooler kids across the street, right? And so they did some things with my kids, and they helped them do a lemonade stand together. And of course, they donated the money to the YMCA. And anyway, things like that happen. I'm just trying to think about how much detail to go into in this story. We had this young woman reach out to our family, and she was trying to find my parents, because she'd gotten their names, and she was trying to find her birth mom. And this birth mom was the one that had lived with us the longest, had really become part of the family. She probably was with us 5 or 6 months. I mean, she actually really lived with us, and then lived with us for a number of months after she had her baby. And amazingly courageous woman, and gave a great gift in terms of having her child be adopted at a time when she could not raise this child. Well, anyway, this child came back. This is 22 years later, right? And so my folks were able to share what they knew. We as kids were always told, oh, they were adopted to North Idaho or whatever. We didn't know anything about. They didn't want us to know anything about any of these things. So, and this was back when adoptions often happened in different ways, right? So long story short, this woman is kind of reaching out with her birth mom. So she ends up reconnecting with her birth mom, and her birth mom's living in another state, and she's living in another state. But they end up connecting, and that was cool. And then they decided they wanted to take a trip to kind of really connect together, and they wanted to take a trip, and the woman wanted her birth mom to meet her adoptive parents and also meet these other people that were formative in their life, right? And we were a part of that list. So we got this call, and they were going to be coming to Idaho. They were doing a road trip together. I mean, it's a really cool story, right?
Great
They're
story.
They're going to do this road trip together, and we were on the list of folks that wanted to connect with, right? And my parents had maintained some connection with this woman, the mom, who had gone on and had a fabulous life.
So cool.
Great marriage, stuff like that. And so they were coming through Idaho, and we were going to be up in Donnelly near McCall. And so they were going to come by and spend an evening there. So we're up there, and I still remember it's a Friday night. We're sitting outside, pine trees, just chatting, just getting to know, well, one, hear what's happened to this woman in the 20 years since she lived at our house, and then hearing from this daughter of hers about what she's doing, and her own great story. And then I'm like, where are you going after this? Oh, we're going to go up to McCall. I'm like, oh yeah, what are you guys doing up there? Well, my parents are up there, and this other family has a place up there, and they're a family I was really close to. And I said, oh wow, who's that? And she said, well, they're from Caldwell, and I was living in Caldwell.
Oh my word.
I said, well, who are they? And she says the names of the people that live across the street from us.
Wow.
That were going to their house. I said, what? And so she kind of explained it, that how she knew them, and she had ended up being a nanny.
Wow.
For the two girls that were so influential on my kids. And I still remember it was Sunday night. I was out at my house, and my neighbor across the street comes walking across. He says, I need to thank your parents. I said, what are you talking about? He said, I heard what your parents did.
Wow.
And he said, you have no idea the impact that girl had on our family's life when we were in a crisis, in terms of a health crisis. We really needed help. She totally influenced who my kids are. And I was sitting there thinking, and your kids have influenced my kids. And it's just fascinating, how the universe brought that to me. It was so cool.
These stories, and that's not coincidence, man.
That's cool.
That's not coincidence. I don't care. Wow. Thanks for sharing that.
You bet. Yeah. Probably just took up about half your podcast with my little story.
These are awesome. Hey, one other thing. So before we move on, so I had a guy that worked here with me, Kent Sager. You got to meet him.
Yeah.
And he heard your last name, and he's like, was he related? Because I worked with a guy at Micron. And
Hewlett Packard.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Hewlett Packard.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't know, ask him. And he went off about your dad.
Yeah.
So incredible people. Before we move on, what are kind of the legacy things you remember about your folks that are just like, what comes to mind? What are the lessons you could share with listeners?
Man, Tommy, you should have warned me about this. We don't have any Kleenex up here and stuff. Like I said, I've just been so fortunate. I already shared a little bit about just them opening up their home and things like that. Really, really loving people, very involved in community. I mean, so involved in community in terms of, and also their marriage was really important to them. And they put a lot of time into it, and we knew that priority. And so they got involved in a lot of things which were helping other people in relationship and things like that. And that ended up forming a lot of real formative friendships for them. So they had a lot of other couples and families that they formed really close relationships to, and so they've been able to walk through life for decades with really, really deep relationships. I think part of that too is, I mentioned the military aspect, right? My dad was from New England, so his family was in New England. My mom had actually grown up with career military, so she'd moved all over the country. My mom went
So community was family.
They had to build it. They had to create family because there was no other family here. Ironically, they really did that, and most of their kids are all here. So they've got family and all these friends here. But my mom's incredible about that. I would just say, hearing her story from her childhood. I mean, I think she went to 7 grade schools and 3 high schools, because her dad was a Marine, and they traveled all over the place. And it's so interesting, that made her able to adjust to new communities, but also really want to have roots and stay in a place. And they really made Boise. And Idaho where they wanted to be. And then worked to create the community they wanted to live in. It was great. Yeah, I hear that stuff about my dad a lot because he was very charismatic, great speaker, and he was involved at Hewlett Packard for a long time. So I'm actually on my way out to our ranch. Like one of the donors helping us build the ranch, I'd never met this person. He'd never met me, but as part of our campaign, he shared about the impact that had in his career in terms of some of the conversations with my dad. And so he gave a gift that was at the level of a naming opportunity out there. He decided to name the thing after my parents. So there's a walking path out there that's being constructed for them. So that's what I'm going to get to work on a little bit this weekend.
So there's a lot to get through because can you kind of get us to the YMCA?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Transition for you.
Yeah.
I had Jim on.
Jim was great.
Jim was great.
Yep.
And we talked about you, and then big transition to the Youth Ranch. And I want to hit the foundation of the Youth Ranch. You've told me the story,
Sure.
and it's incredible.
Yeah.
But then I do want to spend some time because I think I've been involved in a lot of fundraisers.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done a lot. I mean, it's kind of part of the world I live in, and I have never been part of one more successful. Yeah. So I talk every time, like no matter who comes in my door now, I'm like, well, call Scott Curtis because if you want to go to anyway, I want to get to that and the impact that it's making because it was very impactful for me to be part of it. But
I appreciate
talk
that.
a little.
Yeah, and I think I can go fairly quickly through the progression that gets me to the Youth Ranch because the story's fairly consistent. I have been so fortunate to be doing great work. I've always loved the job that I was in and not necessarily been looking for the next one, but a door has just presented itself. It's been like, oh, wow, this is what I need to do. So I'd mentioned I was a high school math teacher and coach, but I really felt drawn to those young people that weren't making it. And I don't mean not making it in math. I could figure that part out. I really loved teaching math, but it was the life stuff, right? So I went back and got a graduate degree in social work, which is a very unusual combination. You don't have a lot of math majors in social work, but you're really popular in graduate school because everybody else hates statistics. They can't get through.
There's left brain, right brain, and then there's that.
Exactly, right. So when I first graduated with my master's degree in social work, I started working in the alternative schools. So it was right up my alley. These young people that weren't quite making it, but you could support and things like that. And I had been involved with the YMCA for a number of years. And actually, starting in 1991, I started working for the Y summers in college, and then I was on the board there. So I actually witnessed the start of this Caldwell project from being just a dream people were talking about and they're never going to be able to get that done kind of thing, to, wow, this is getting some legs, to, oh my goodness, look what this community is doing with the support of what was then the Boise Y. Look what this community is doing for itself. So by the time that they got to getting closer to the opening, I was actually a part of the interview process trying to hire people to be the executive director of the Caldwell Y. And they went through a number of iterations there, and whether they didn't find the right person or the right person didn't want to come here, they ended up deciding we need to broaden our search and allow it to be people that haven't been YMCA professionals. And when they broadened that, and my wife's been a big part of any one of these key decisions in my life. I mean, she was one of the ones saying, I think you should be thinking about this job. And I said, what? I'm a social worker who works individually doing counseling with kids and groups. I don't know anything about recreation and fitness and also managing that many people. But again, one of the major things in my life was that decision. And, I still remember when David Duro, who's now the CEO of the Treasure Valley Y, called me. It was April 1st, ironically, but we didn't get into that. Said, hey, we want you to do this. So Kathleen and I were so thrilled. We'd already spent a number of days just coming out to Caldwell and sitting in the park or being in restaurants, and it felt like a strong connection for us. A little piece to that is Kathleen and I both did volunteer work in South America. She was in a large orphanage system in Argentina, and I was in rural Chile. So we both spoke Spanish, but also we had a kind of a passion for community development and building. And so what Caldwell was really trying to do was bring their community together. And for those that can go back 20 plus years, there was some serious statistics going on.
Crazy.
It's unbelievable what was going on there. And again, such credit. Caldwell has such great people, and Canyon County has such great people. They said, we're going we're going to throw ourselves in. And the Y was a part of that, a big part of that. And the city leadership and just local leaders and business leaders. And I can name the names here because there's still, a lot of them are still doing it out there. So got to work with the Y. That was an incredible, incredible gift, and was there in Caldwell, almost 10 years. Being the first executive director, starting from the, laying the sod outside to hiring the first staff and having great people just come on.
And then watching that community transform. I think that's the day I remember sitting there and you showing the statistics of
phenomenal.
It is this precipitous drop off.
Yeah.
And you telling the story of, hey, once we had a place that people could come together from all walks of life and feel a sense of community and ownership and belonging.
It's incredible.
What happened?
Yeah. And a place for youth and a place where people were going to learn their names and, an option for young people that were looking to belong somewhere. And at that point, we're choosing gangs and things like that. But for them to have an option and caring adults that would be there. Yeah. And that wasn't easy. That was big work and a lot of work. And that was phenomenal. That was phenomenal. You just look back and say, how did I get to be so lucky to be a part of that? And I loved it.
You get to rub shoulders with Jim.
Jim was great. David was great. Billy, Cliff, I could name all the names of the people that just I got to learn from. And the other thing, Tommy, is not only have I been blessed to have the opportunities I've had, but I've gotten to work with people that are passionate about mission. And that includes the people that work in the places, but it also includes people like you. Because one of the things about we'll get to that campaign, but one of the things about being involved in fundraising or community development in general is you have to have the leaders stand up for it to be successful. You can't just be tooting your own horn. You need people to, and once that happens, it's like you take 2 steps forward, they take 3, you take another 2, and it's this momentum,
right?
Yeah, momentum is huge.
But Scott, it comes from authenticity, right? It comes from like deeply rooted, genuine commitment to cause.
For sure.
And if that thing can be witnessed through the hearts, minds, and souls of the people involved, then it's like it's just crazy when it happens, and that becomes a common thing. That's why I send so many people your way, because as people come in and they're like, hey, we're trying to raise money for this, and we really are passionate about that, and you're sitting in a room, you're like, hey, man, it's gotta be like, I know the words, I see the brochure. I know the words.
It's got to be.
I see the brochures, and I actually see the need. That's the other thing that people don't understand sometimes is the need can be huge. It could be palpable.
Right.
The brochure can be polished in whether it's matte or a glossy finish.
A lot of time goes into that decision.
And now chat GPT's out there. You can write whatever you want to write. But if the values of the mission aren't deeply ingrained in the people that are selling this vision, it ain't gonna work.
Yeah, I totally agree. And honestly, that's what brought me to the Youth Ranch.
So make that transition.
Well, I had so much opportunity to grow with the Treasure Valley YMCA, and I just owe so much to those experiences and to the people I worked with. So I had moved from Caldwell in my role to being a broader role across the organization. I was in a senior role working directly with the CEO, Jim, and then David, and I was doing strategic advancement projects and things like that. So we were able to do the South Meridian YMCA, the Tomlinson Y, which was another fabulous experience with community, and those were the things we were working on. And I was really loving that. Not looking to do anything else when a conversation happened with me about the Youth Ranch, and my initial reaction was, I'm not really interested because I'm in a great spot here, and also I've lived here my whole life. I can't tell you very much what the Youth Ranch does. And so what was great about that is folks said, well, are you at least willing to have a conversation and take a look? And I said, sure. So, the end of the story is I ended up deciding, wow, I could really grow coming to the Youth Ranch, and I have some things to offer that are probably timely for the organization, and decided to put my hat in the ring for the open CEO position. That was 7 years ago that started. But let me go to the Youth Ranch because you wanted to hear a little bit about the history, because that's what drew me to it.
But I also want to highlight something before you do. I think I've got a few mantras in life, but people follow people. And I think of where the youth ranch was at that point. If you went back 6 years and said to me, hey, Idaho Youth Ranch, what does it do? I probably would say, I just would say, I don't know. I know they have a few thrift stores. But what I have loved about your hire and getting the right person in the right role, I think you're storyteller, you're passionate, you're mission driven. And once you get now you're like, oh, that's one of the coolest things I've ever heard.
It is.
It's like, are you kidding me?
So I
think bringing that out of obscurity and telling the story and connecting mission with people is what that's what God's blessed you with. I mean, it's been critical that it's a great example of a leader hitting a mission and then taking off.
Right. And
it's only been that long.
It's been 6.5 years, man. January.
I'm just blown up. I just know where this is heading and what you've accomplished.
Great. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And it's a we. So when I looked at the first thing I looked at was the mission, and you asked a little bit about that. And we are on such a solid foundation in terms of, wow, there has been grace operating here from the beginning. So in the early 1950s, our founders, the Crows, they were this wonderful couple. He'd been a military chaplain and was actually overseas while she was writing all the letters to senators and getting his name on everything and working to get this vision of a ranch that would be a healing place for what they called wayward boys back then. So that was a lot of effort, and I could spend the whole podcast talking about just their efforts to get this. Eventually, they were able to purchase for like $1 a year or something, 2,500 acres in Sequa, which is right outside of Rupert, Idaho. This was sagebrush land, and this was the 1950s. And so this wonderful couple, she was a full-time school teacher by day. They brought in the boys, they got the original land, and they started building the ranch. There's so many cool stories that, for example, a lot of people don't know this, but the Minidoka internment camp, which had been a Japanese internment camp in World War II, Minidoka is not that far from Rupert. They actually dragged across the desert 2 of the original barracks from Minidoka, tied those things together, and that became the original lodge for the boys on the ranch. So there's just so much stuff about the history of the youth ranch that is so cool like that. And it grew from there, and it grew with really passionate people. The original people that went there to work, Reverend Crow went to University of Idaho and recruited young couples that were graduating, and people came from other parts of the state, and they'd go and live there with the kids and help the ranch grow. So it became a full-fledged nonprofit in the 50s, and then started to grow throughout the 60s. In the 70s and early 80s was really when the organization started to expand significantly. First they went co-ed at the ranch, and that ranch campus is wonderful. At its heyday, probably served 30 to 40 kids. It's very remote. It's 12 miles outside of Rupert. So this was a place to have the kids kind of get sent away to and get healed, right? And there was a lot of love in that place. So then the youth ranch really, I got to jump to today because it's just too much history, but there's obviously pieces where the youth ranch got into in the early 80s, adoptions, right? Because the state needed someone to really facilitate adoption. So, and then the thrift store piece started in the early 80s because someone for the youth ranch had heard about a place in California that had some revenue coming in through a thrift store. And so, long story short, you jump up to 6.5 years ago, what I was seeing about the youth ranch was they were in a real challenge in terms of the financials were really struggling. They'd been losing money. The thrift stores had been losing money. Programs had been challenged because they'd closed the ranch in Rupert in order to build the new ranch here in the Treasure Valley. And they had the property, but the program plan and the fundraising, the initial fundraising campaign had really hit some walls. So I was looking at the organization and looking at this history and this mission. They had outpatient services in multiple parts of the state. They were running adoptions. The Hayes Shelter Home is the only shelter for runaway and homeless youth in the entire Treasure Valley. And that has been operating since the 60s. There's all these things the youth ranch was doing, and they were a little bit on the ropes. And I thought, man, this is the place that kids that have fallen through the cracks, it's like the last safety net for some of these kids and families. And this is going to be a problem. This goes away. And as I started to meet the staff and the board members that were involved, they had drawn a line in the sand, and they were doing the hard work to get this place to be back. And so I really have to emphasize that, because a number of the returns for those efforts started to be seen right after I came. But things like, you've done a lot of great business. You don't turn that in 2 months, right? So when my first board meeting is showing positive financials, that had nothing to do with me. That had to do with a year and a half of really retooling the stores, doubling down on certain aspects of thrift, getting efficient, closing 7 stores in order to become more efficient with the 24 that remained. So huge, that's been great. And the timing was all great, because we needed the organization to be stabilized before asking other people to give to it.
Yeah.
And that was the magic of timing was a couple things. Because let me get to the capital campaign. So, my first board meeting, the board made it clear, hey, you need to have a sustainable program that is a residential program, because that's our flagship. That's how we were founded, and that's a huge need in Idaho. So we went to work developing the program, and then we did a feasibility study and talked with a lot of people about what's going on. And one of the things that happened, I think, for me that felt pretty linchpin or part of the zeitgeist of 5 years ago, 15 or 20 years ago, in my role at the Y, if I was talking about mental illness, right, or suicide or things like that, people would talk about it and have lots of sensitivity, but their own ability to, as you were talking about, truly empathize or, just awareness was different. When you and I started that campaign 5 years ago, when we actually launched the campaign in 2020, when we talked to people about stuff going on with kids and the mental health pieces, they all had their own story. Yeah. They have a neighbor, they have a nephew or a niece or their own child. That was a big shift in a 10 to 15 year period. And that may have just been my own awareness growing, but I really felt like people were ready to talk about this. And then I think I just kind of skipped a whole piece there, Tommy, though, and jumped into the capital campaign without giving people the background there.
Just a little bit of what the need was. It is a significant need for families in Idaho, and we were sending these kids out of state.
That was what,
because there is nothing here. So I think that
nobody knew that.
And
the Youth Ranch didn't know that. So part of the Youth Ranch is kind of figuring out how to be in these, how to survive and get through what were really big challenges. For whatever reason, at that point, the ranch hadn't been taking Medicaid, hadn't been taking insurance, had lived off of donations and people paying as well as contracts. Well, as those things went different directions, they were in a financial crisis. So part of that was saying, hey, we're serving low income kids. Some of the kids we're serving. Should we be tapping into some Medicaid reimbursement? And what they learned from the Medicaid system was for a youth to get residential treatment, right, it has to be an federally accredited facility for psychiatric residential treatment. Idaho did not have a single one. So what that meant is, but we have kids here that need residential treatment. So Idaho for years had been sending all of these kids to other states, which the research is really clear that the more you can have families involved, quite frankly, part of the reason.
And just think about the significance if you're one of those families. At this point, you've tried everything.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't go straight to residential inpatient. I mean, at that point, you have battled.
Yeah.
You have fought. You have done everything you can to make this thing work, and you now are like, okay,
that is the story of a lot of these parents.
We are hopeless.
Yeah.
And we are too. And now you're like, oh, there's nowhere in Idaho.
Yeah. I met this woman, and she's fabulous. She ended up being a part of our initial video. Husband's a doctor. They had moved to Idaho to a rural community because they wanted to be a part of serving the health needs in our state, right? And they were really committed. They were up on the prairie. They had an adopted child that ended up having this level of mental health needs. And they were basically told, sorry, if you want to be near a child getting treatment, you're going to need to move to another state. And they were trying to stay here to live out their dream of serving here. Their child had been in 3 different states in residential treatment, with them flying or driving, trying to get to them. And she'd been in Arkansas. I mean, that's tough from Idaho. So anyway, that we were able to, part of the capital campaign was we were able to understand what's the data saying about mental health and what is people's awareness of it? And so and then what's Idaho's reality? And we really said, and our co-chairs of the campaign were fabulous about this. Mark Miller and Robert Rebholz. I mean, I still remember them saying, this is an Idaho problem.
Yeah.
We in Idaho are going to take care of this. People rallied to that.
So you had an authentic need that was
For
deep
sure.
and mission driven that you could connect with easily, and then you had you. I mean, I'm like I'm not being like you had the leader, because I think within an organization, if you have someone that can tell the story, that it's not just words, it's not just glossy or mad, it's the thing, and then you had co-chairs, you had Mark Miller and Rob Rebholz,
Yep.
Two of these legendary leaders, business leaders here in the community, connected, and they were in it to win it. I mean, they were mission driven.
They sure were. The part of that story that I just shake my head at is we'd done the feasibility study. We knew it needed to be a statewide campaign. And the fascinating thing about the feasibility study, I think we met with 60, 80 people across this state. And that was just a listening tour. That was before we even had co-chairs. I kept thinking people, when we really got down to it, were going to be a little more provincial. So, for example,
Sure.
I kept thinking people in Sandpoint are going to say, that would be great, but I'd support it if it was being built up here or whatever. We didn't hear that from a single person.
Yeah.
They said, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
We're sending our kids to other states?
Yeah.
And I know kids, by the way, like that. I've got some in my family, and how are we gonna do this? So that was a huge piece.
So talk a little bit about the property, because you have there's a story behind it, but it is unbelievably cool.
It is. It's amazing. So this is in its closest community is Middleton. It's a Caldwell property, Caldwell address, but it's really close to Middleton. So it's in rural ranch farmland, right? The cool thing about this property is it was a tree farm that was established in the 60s by the Hopkins family. And some of them, people will remember the Hopkins Christmas tree lots all over the valley, right? So it's this kind of massive forest. About 50 of the acres are probably just forest and tree farm. And then it had become a private estate. And so they had put in addition to their home, but they'd put in a 9-hole golf course. And what that meant is there's open space, there's streams and ponds. It's not a golf course now.
Yeah.
It looks like you've driven onto this like section of Idaho. There's ponds, there's streams, there's open fields, there's pasture, there's forest. We don't have a river rushing through it, and that's a good thing. But I mean,
But it's just amazing.
It's amazing.
It's like a little oasis. You go out there, you're like, whoa, this is perfect.
Yeah, and that's another piece that I say is it's just serendipity or grace, because there was a downturn here. You remember that in 2007, 2008. And this property had been on the market for many years. So in 2015, the Youth Ranch got it. But 6 months later, the turnaround had started.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't have come to us because it was an incredible, it was a gift. 258 acres.
No coincidences.
Yeah. So it's 258 acres. The property was great. So one of the brilliant things, we had recruited Mark and Robert to be the co-chairs of the campaign. And this was in 2019. We finished, I started in January. We did our feasibility study, finished that in fall. And so the winter of 2019, early 2020, Robert and Mark had agreed to the campaign. It was going to be a $20 million campaign, and had recruited most of the
cabinet. To put that in perspective, that's huge.
It was a huge it was a huge lift.
Like, it's massive.
And we said,
you hear that number and you're like, okay, this can be hard.
And we
because
mapped
having been
out
by several of them, 4, 6, 9, 10, 12, you're like, ugh.
Yeah, this was big.
A lot of the same people get asked. This is huge.
Yeah. And we had mapped out the campaign and said, okay, it's going to be a 1.5 to 2 years of getting the initial major gifts, and then you move to the community campaign level. Robert kind of looked and said, I'm not sure we're going to be taking that long. If you don't know anything about Robert Rebholz, you don't know. You should know that he's pretty hard worker, and he's competitive, and he also likes to get stuff done.
Yeah,
because he's got a lot of stuff going on, and Mark's the same way. So here we are, winter 2019 to 2020, and we've recruited many of the cabinet members, and people were being brought in by the message. That property was a piece of it. When we wanted to recruit somebody, they would just say, we have to take you to the property to see if you're interested. And once people came on that property, then they started to say, okay, there's something special going on here. And then they learned about the history. And of course, by that point, we were able to share about the financials of the youth ranch and how those were stabilized and our impact on youth. So the timing was just perfect. But then we all know what happened in early 2020.
Yeah.
Right? We were supposed to have our first cabinet meeting to in person in April 2020. Well, obviously nobody was allowed to meet anywhere. And Robert and Mark were like, okay, we'll just keep figuring things out. We'll regroup. Let's just let them know. And then I still remember it was May of 2020. Most of the state was shut down, and we were having a video call between the three of us. And Robert says, "Well, we need to launch the campaign." I said, "Yeah, well, we're gonna have to launch it at some point. We'll just see when we get through this." He said, "No, we need to launch it now." And I said, "People can't even get together." He said, "There's some people that need something to be caring about."
Yeah.
So we're gonna launch. So you may remember this. We launched the campaign in June.
Yep.
We had a meeting. It was kind of open air meeting, but we got the whole cabinet together, launched the campaign. We had a little horse there that had on the side of it written the number of dollars we'd raised to that point, which was, $2 million or whatever committed, but launched that campaign. And we had said we have to get to 85% of the goal to break ground, right? And I'll be darned, we broke ground the next May. And it just kept going.
So that's what's like. I mean, I hope like of all the things I've ever witnessed, you you join, you have this incredible goal that seems impossible. Mm-hmm. You have COVID hit.
Yeah, that was big. That was big.
And you have this record breaking. Like I can't like you broke ground. It's built.
Yeah.
It's open. That's what I'm saying. Like, if you look about what's happened in a short period of time, so I can't wait to hear. Like, it's beautiful. It's amazing out there now, and the ribbon cutting ceremony, the whole thing, and now you're seeing patients. Yeah, I'm dying to hear how it's going.
It's going really well in terms of transformed lives, right? So the whole campus is running. We've got a charter school that's there that's running. We have youth coming in. A lot of the stuff we talked about, because we'd gone around the country and tried to take the best of everything we saw, and then we built it into a vision and kept talking about it. There have been some things that aren't exactly the same, but for the most part, like we talked about, this is one of those programs. This is a family program. Like we need the caring adults involved, not just the staff, but we need the parents these kids are going back to.
Ultimately, that's where they're going home to.
That's where they're going. Yeah. Their engagement. I'm on my way out there today for family. We have 24 kids there right now.
Wow.
We have 38 adults coming to have lunch with their kids all at the same time. The families are coming every week. Our first graduate.
Can you tell us a little bit? So talk a little bit about the campus. How many buildings?
Yeah, that's great.
So just because, and then is there a website? So if you go to youthranch.org, right? Is there a campus if someone's here?
Oh, geez. Yeah, you want to go to, I would go to, let's go to For Youth. We're on the website, everybody navigating it.
Yeah.
Go to,
so there's Hayes House, there's Youth.
Yeah, go to Safe
Place.
Yeah, go to Safe Place. This is actually good for me to be doing this. I don't jump on here and navigate this all the time. Go ahead. Let's see. I think it's going to be Parent Resources, actually. Oh, no. I'm sorry. It's not Safe Place. That's a whole other program. Would you go to Parent Resources?
Let's see here.
Come on. Yeah, jump to brochure. This is going to help. There should be a brochure on the residential center for healing and resilience. Goodness gracious.
Hey,
we got a lot of stuff on this website.
There's someone in your organization that is going to take you behind the woodshed.
I know they're about
wait.
They're about to get me.
Hey, listen.
Go to
the other problem we've got here is I'm sitting here looking through here. It's thrift stores, Hayes House, equine therapy. There's youth ranch. There's a lot of stuff.
There's a lot of stuff going on. But I want to be able to talk to it if someone's getting.
But anyway, to get back, you have so many buildings there.
Okay,
they all went up at the same time. It's this
the whole thing
multidisciplinary program that wraps around these kids in Idaho. You're up to 26 kids. Here we go.
Yeah. So it's called the Residential Center for Healing and Resilience. One of the things we learned was, first of all, the need in Idaho. So we did needs assessment. We knew that the biggest need was 11 through 17-year-olds. Really, the highest need, if you can believe it, is 12 to 14-year-olds, and more need among females than males. There's some stuff around that I could get into. But so we decided to build really a state-of-the-art campus with all individualized rooms. Every program that we went to across the country, if they had more than one youth in a room, they said if we could change one thing, we'd give them a private space. They are going through so much.
Huge deal.
It's a huge deal. So we really built this thing and said, we shrunk. We removed a whole building because we wanted the quality to be, and we said if we have to expand, we'll have to expand, but we can't do this on the cheap. So that's what people experience when they go out there. The kids do not feel like it's an institution. They walk in, it's beautiful space. It's also very intentionally built. I mean, these are youth. Many of them come to us are very high risk, right? So we can't have, we just have to have spaces that whether or not they look safe, we know that everything has been scrubbed and placed and built to not give them access to hurt themselves, quite frankly, Tommy, because I mean, the majority of the kids that are coming to us there now, their parents are scared. They're scared. They've tried to hurt themselves, and we're
again tried everything else, and here you go, right?
So it's a 64 youth facility. So we have everything that's needed there. There are residential lodges, and that includes the social space, green space, and stuff. There's a great dining facility. There's a recreational gymnasium. There's a wellness center. So that's where we have 24-hour nursing. We have psychiatrists. We have therapists, psychologists, and then we in terms of solving the education component, that was a big thing we figured out. We ended up getting a lot of support around the state, including from our local school district, Middleton, to build a charter school because these youth have very specialized needs. So we're running a charter school there. It's a separate nonprofit. That has been huge, and I just got to cut right to here's the miracle that's happening. We had a youth graduate. We had a youth graduate last week. She's had a pretty long stay. 8 months is a long stay. We really say, 4 to 6 months is how people should probably think about this. And the whole idea is you're taking young people who, like you said earlier, they've tried other things. The parents have tried. They've been working at it. It hasn't worked. We need intense 24-hour control of nutrition, exercise, medications, this as a doctor, getting that balanced in a space where everybody can see what's going on and can tweak that, that's huge for these kids. And then teaching them how to manage it and teaching them how to manage their emotional breakthroughs. Wow. So we had this girl leave last week, going home successfully to her parents. She's already plugged into another one of our programs. When she came in August, she could hardly leave her room, like curled up, not able to leave her room. And when I saw her last week before her graduation, she's walking around the campus like she's an elder statesman, and she's interacting with the other youth, kind of helping them along. So that's life-changing, and that's what has to happen there. So we have 24 kids there today. So our biggest gap, and we have lots of youth eligible to come. Our biggest gap is the staffing aspect, right? The staffing and training. And if you could help with anything, it's just to have people know that.
I was gonna get to that. So ways to help you.
Yeah.
So a couple things, like there's the website. Go there, and there's so many ways to give. There's a lot of ways to give, and look at all your programs you have. You have the Youth Ranch thrift stores. You have ways to give directly. But then one of the biggest needs right now, Scott, is what you're going to hit on, because we've talked about this before.
Yeah.
It is staffing. So you built this facility. It's just hard to find. Like if you look at the world we live in right now, the
labor has been fascinating.
Labor is just hard, especially specialized labor.
Well, that's what I want. You can help me right now because I want to correct that. Like this is a 64 youth campus. 120 full-time positions. Some of those are very specialized, right? We need therapists, we need psychiatrists, we need nurses. That's not our biggest gap.
Really?
Tommy. Over 60 of those positions are basically the people that do what you and I do in our own homes. They're the ones that are with the kids day in, day out. They're walking to and from school with them. They're going to the dining hall and eating
So it's the
with them.
companion services and those sorts of things.
We call them youth care providers, and they're the ones that are there also when a kid starts to melt down.
Yeah.
And they're the ones, because they are very highly trained, they're the ones reminding, okay, hey, this is what you've been working on.
I would have not guessed that. So
so we need people that are 21 years old or older and want to be engaged with kids. We will teach them. We can't teach somebody if they tend to be really volatile or get angry or something like that. You just can't have that kind of person, because these kids need stability and they need calm adults that can talk them through stuff and like being with young people. Over age 21 and up to any age you want. We've got some great people that they're retired. They've come back and said, I just want to, I want to be with kids, and I'll take a job that I can just, I'm being with kids and I'm just talking to them about life because we have to have 24. This is shift work. We don't have, it's not like the old ranch where there were house parents that lived in the houses with the youth. These kids are in lodges of 8, but it's shift work. So meaning we have 3 different shifts. But there's somebody working day, swing, and then overnight.
Yeah, and so now you're recruiting people working swing and night shifts.
Yeah, so they need to have graduated from high school and be 21 years old and have relative balance in terms of being able to manage their own emotions. That's our biggest gap. We get them, and then the training that's required, because we do put folks through a lot of training. We don't want to staff. Well,
so for anyone listening out there that wants to know more, Scott is, if you don't know him, you should know him, and if you want to go take a little field trip, it is life changing to see the work you're doing. And I think the feedback I'm hearing from everywhere, I mean, you think about the significance this is for our state and the families of Idaho having this resource here. It's tremendous.
Yeah, thank you. I will tell you that a couple cool things we said. We said this is going to be for the whole state. In our first 18 months, we served kids from 13 counties in Idaho. And the other piece is the caregivers of these kids. Our first graduate was from Sandpoint. Mom had adopted this child, unbeknownst to her, had a traumatic brain injury. So she was dealing with brain stuff she didn't even know about for years. And the only place she could get seen was the emergency room, where he would get medicated and stabilized, and then he wasn't eligible for services because he was stable. But here's the important part of that story. Mom drove to the campus every week to be a part of the family therapy. So we are excited. You knew about this because we talked about it before, but we are excited. Our next big push is we're building family visitation lodging right next to the center, so that parents can come and be there for weekends, be there for overnights, and get time with their kids so they're ready to go home. Well,
hey Scott, like you're such an inspiration, example to so many. I hope you know that. Hope you know how much we love and appreciate you. This community loves and appreciates you. Thank you for the work you do. Thank you for what you do for the ranch, but for the community at large, and for just your overall example to so many. It's been an honor having you on today.
I appreciate you doing this. I'm glad you decided to do this with the show. Seriously, and it's awesome knowing you. You're a huge part of this.
Yeah.
You've
thanks, brother.
You've intersected a lot with a lot of pieces of my that story I told. So thank you and your family.
Thanks for coming on.
You bet.
Thanks, everybody.
It's great.